How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Before I Forget. This is my video channel, inspired by my Instagram channel, 1985 Road Dog. Wanted to jump on and record my thoughts about David Johansen's passing. I'm sure most of you know who he is. He's a lead singer for the New York Dolls, and he's been a solo artist for years, and always, David Johansen was always, he was always bubbling under. He was never a huge artist, but he was influential. He was a native New Yorker, born in Staten Island. And he was essential to the New York rock scene in late 70s, of course, mid 70s, early 70s, starting with the Dolls, 72, 73 in there, 74, the Dolls. And then, he went solo, late 70s, and was involved in and influential and part of the whole punk scene coming out of CB's and Max's, and he was a big influence in New York. Friendly with everybody. David Bowie and that whole Warhol scene, of course, through the Dolls and everything. But the solo stuff of David Johansen in the late 70s. That's, to me, the prime rock and roll David Johansen. Yes, the Dolls. I read an interesting thing about the David Johansen, now that he's passed. A lot of old interview clips and old interviews are surfacing, and he was talking about the Dolls' legacy, how it's, people remember the Dolls as like, dressing like women and, junkies, and that's what people think of when they think of the Dolls, that outrageousness. But not the music, really. What they were trying to do musically in 1972, 73 was, again, the beginning of what became punk. The playing the Dolls kind of basic Chuck Berry rock and roll mixed with the 60s girl group vibe, or the Four Tops Motown vibe. I mean, that's what the Dolls were. They were very a throwback to the 50s and 60s musically, which was not what was going on in 1973 in America. In 1973, you're in the middle of the soft rock craze and John Denver and, that kind of thing. The Osmonds, and it was a very, vanilla musical landscape for the most part. Sure, there were some rock exceptions here or there, whoever, Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, but those were big bands. The Dolls were so out there, dressing the way they did. And, again, like Johansen was saying, that's what people remember them for, is the dressing like women and being junkies. Johansen wasn't a junkie. I mean, I'm sure he did his share of drugs, but the junkies in the Dolls were really Johnny Thunders and Jerry Nolan. Arthur Kane was an alcoholic. I had, the pleasure of hanging with Arthur a couple times in the mid or late 80s in the LA scene when he lived out there. But the junkies were Johansen and Nolan. I'm not Johansen. Bad. The junkies were Johnny Thunders and Jerry Nolan. David Johansen was, he was much more intelligent. He was smarter than all those other guys. He was witty. I never really met him. I shook his hand once, but I've again, I was just talking to my good friend from high school, Scott Levitt, about David Johansen. And he reminded me, him and my other good friend, Bruno Ravel, went to see the David Johansen group live in 1978 at Irving Plaza. That period of David Johansen was, to me, the greatest, 78, 79 in there. He released his first solo album. Then in 79, he released an album called In Style. This was my favorite David Johansen record. And he put out this live album that was a promotional album originally. It was live from the Bottom Line, legendary New York venue. And it was live from there, and it was a promotional record. And it really, I was just listening to it on YouTube. It really captures that band. His band at the time was Frankie LaRocca was playing drums, legendary. Thomas Trask was the guitarist. Buzz Verno on bass. Johnny Rea was the other guitarist. And Sylvain from the Dolls also played on that live record with the Johansen band. But that band was on fire. I saw that band. I didn't see that gig. Scott and Bruno went to see the David Johansen group live, 1978 Bottom Line. Irving Plaza. The record was recorded, the album was recorded at the Bottom Line the same year. I saw the David Johansen group at Central Park Music Festival, I think in 1980. That same band, on fire. A great New York rock and roll band. And then I saw David Johansen group, for the most part, the same players in the band, open for The Who and The Clash at Shea Stadium, 1982. It was The Who. It was the first Who tour, I think, without Keith Moon. The Clash had Combat Rock was their big album, so they were big. And David Johansen was the opening act. And I also saw that same band when I was the DJ at Malibu in like 81. So that band, if you're really into like, David Johansen, or you want to get into him, or you don't know where to start, go to his first couple of records. The first album on Blue Sky Records, just called David Johansen, I believe. And then In Style was his second album on the same label. And that promotional album is not really out. I think it was released, it was released in 93 on CD. But it's not on Spotify because I just checked. But that album with that band is killer. What are the songs they do? Cool Metro, Looking for a Kiss, Funky But Chic, Donna, Build Me Up Buttercup, the old 60s song, Reach Out, I'll Be There, Motown song. Johansen loved the Motown. Frenchette, Personality Crisis. It's just really, captures that band and that moment. Because New York in that time, man, late 70s, when you had whatever was left of the Dolls kind of glam rock scene from like 73, 74, it's kind of faded out. And what was left of it was still going on at the Great Gildersleeves, some of it at Max's and some other places. But the CBGB scene really started taking over. And the punk thing and the Ramones and Blondie and all that stuff. But Johansen was right in there, man. If you look at the old rock scene magazines from the 70s, which was, whatever was happening in New York was in rock scene. There were a million photos, little black and white photos in the magazine, but David Johansen was in the mix for all of it because he was respected and he was looked at as an influence and a pioneer in the New York rock scene. Johansen was always in that mix and always respected and always well-liked. And then he did his Buster Poindexter thing and he started doing a few movie roles. I mean, he's got to pay the bills, which was God bless. But that period of David Johansen, 78, 79, 80 in there, 81, even up to 82, that period of the David Johansen group was on fire. One of the best bands I've seen at that time, and they were just, they had the credibility. But, again, the Dolls were never big. We all know this. The Dolls never sold any records. The Dolls no one gave a shit about the Dolls until much, much, much later on. I mean, I remember being, a kid, 16, 17, 18 in there. And you'd find the Dolls albums, which are now worth, crazy money in the collector market. But you'd find the first two Dolls albums in the cutout bin for, a quarter. It was like no one cared about the Dolls. They didn't sell any records. They were too weird and freaky for the rest of America. And of course, in England, which is much hipper than America when it comes to the music scene at the time. In England, Steve Jones, the Sex Pistols, saw the Dolls open for the Faces over there. Morrissey has always been a champion of the Dolls. So they got it. In America, it was like, you can't have a band that looked like the Dolls in 73. going outside of New York City, they'd get killed. No one knew no one dressed like that and looked like that. Plus, they were junkies. Plus, they had that attitude. Again, Thunders and Nolan were junkies. But they had that New York attitude, so it just wouldn't work. So they were way ahead of their time, the Dolls. David Johansen picked up the pieces from the Dolls, got his solo thing together, never got huge, but always got the respect, always did tours, always played. So it's, he's the last of the Dolls to go. God bless David Johansen. Find those first couple of Dolls albums, first couple of Johansen albums on Blue Sky Records. And you can find the first 2 Dolls albums, of course. Those are classics. And find the first David Johansen and In Style, and look for that live album from '78 on YouTube, because I didn't find it on Spotify. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you watching. My book's available on Amazon globally. Tales from the Gutter and Other Rock and Roll Shenanigans. So check that out if you want to read more about my life in music. And check out my Instagram, 1985 Road Dog. Thanks for listening. Check out David Johansen. Ciao.